Welcome to the My Narrative podcast. I'm your host, Yafa Ares. The following is a conversation with Amir Bozorgzadeh. Amir is the CEO and co-founder of Virtualeap. He's a market researcher, games publisher, and tech writer, currently working at the intersection of spatial computing, emerging tech, and social impact. His company, Virtualeap, combines neuroscience and virtual reality to help increase attention levels and address cognitive illnesses, disorders, and learning challenges. Hey, Amir, it's good to have you today for this conversation on VR and Virtualeap.
Thank you for having me, Yafa.
Great pleasure. So before we dive into, VR and its potential and all the good stuff, Virtualeap, tell me about it.
Yeah, so we're a VR therapeutics company. What we've done is gotten into niche space of taking all of these well-known neuropsychological assessment tools that have been used for years by neurologists to assess someone's mental fitness, their memory, performance, and cognitive performance in general. And we've translated these into 3D rendered environments and made a library of short closed loop games that every day you can come play about 15 minutes and get your kind of cognitive workout of the day and see how you score over time. So we call the app Enhanced VR. We've made it available on all the major VR app stores. We've had about 20,000 early registered users. And we also have this pretty sophisticated enterprise platform where all the data comes in so that we can allow senior living communities, or schools, or companies, or hospitals and research partners to basically work with us and work with their communities.
That sounds good. And hey, congrats! I saw that your company received the STEAM.org accreditation. So what does that mean in practice? And congrats again. That's pretty good.
Yeah, ultimately our company is both at the intersection of healthcare and education. And as a startup, you have to pick one or the other to really focus on. You need to have a North Star, and our focus is inherently on the healthcare side because a lot of clinical research has to be done to validate those applications and the therapeutic effects, and that we're actually the next gold standard in cognitive assessment. So, we have our first 2 clinical studies beginning this year, for example. However, my interest and where I think as a lifestyle solution and platform, our technology is really well oriented is for really education, ed tech, for someone to be able to continuously understand their mental performance and cognitive performance, their weaknesses and strengths, how to develop on those weaknesses, how to become more wholesome. And our tool is so well oriented for specifically that, and specifically for, students of all ages. So we got our little small steps in the direction of that to make institutions or K-12 schools feel like we are a serious company, having developed things in a very, very HIPAA compliant, GDPR way, but also from the point of view that these games are developed by neuroscientists for the purposes of all of the nice abbreviations like STEM and all the other versions of it for those kind of use cases. So it's one kind of flag in that direction to back our brand.
Yeah, and I think that's why I wanted really to have a conversation with you, because there's something good about your company, right? It's all based on actual scientific data and research. And I'm interested to hear about, very briefly, I guess, your journey, what was going on in your life for you to deep dive into VR, and maybe work for our listeners to actually mention the VR is unique, right? And it's unique because it triggers our nervous system in different ways compared to any tools or apps that are available on the market.
So I love the way you talk, because you sound like me pitching at an event. It's exactly true. Virtual reality is the first digital format that triggers our autonomic nervous system, our vestibular balance system, our proprioception into believing that the experience is real, which is a feat of magic. Last year, the FDA in the US, they just created a new category called medical extended reality. specifically for VR, for therapeutic applications. In fact, the reason I got into this space, my background is a market researcher, grew up in Canada, got into games publishing for quite a leap of time, and did my a little forays in social impact ventures before this company. But what I did from 2015 to about 2019 is write a lot of articles for VentureBeat and TechCrunch on the topic of virtual reality, and I didn't make a dime on that. It was just my period of time of researching the hell out of this sector. And what I discovered very clearly is that there's only two critical use cases for virtual reality, and it's healthcare and education. I mean, it's very easy for me to say that because that's where my startup is, but VR is a gaming platform and all these things. I'm not very interested in that. And I'm not interested in VR for long form, like longer than 15, 20-minute sessions. I don't like that either. I think augmented reality is where that comes in. But the therapeutic applications and why the FDA created that application, and a company, Applied VR, just got breakthrough designation for pain management in VR, because for whatever reasons we're not really clear on, when you're in a virtual reality experience, your visual sense believes that experience is real, your system believes it's real, and actually the pain receptors in your brain even dampen. So it's the use cases are so crazy, and my reason for coming into it was, one, I researched the hell out of it, but two, I have things like a phobia of heights and other types of things like this that I've always just been fascinated beyond expression on how can I use technology and the magic available in this world to transcend those kind of barriers and limitations.
Yeah, and you're not alone. I'm also super scared of heights, and I think I've played with a couple of VR games, and I thought actually my life was in true danger and probably had nearly a panic attack. But hey,
right. Right. Well, here, just one quick thing. I was in a few years ago. I was in one exhibition in Switzerland, a VR one, and there was a experience called Birdie, which was created by a French company. And I sat into this custom hardware and I put my arms into it and I have to wave it and I'm flying above New York City. And right when it turned on, I'll promise you this, I kind of lost my sense of where the hell I was. I was so triggered and so scared that I was trying to figure out how to abort the experience. And my wife came over and she said, breathe, because she noticed I was not breathing. I was that shocked by it. And so it really is, it's absolutely true. It does trigger us that way. But if you can use it for desensitization therapy, which has been used for I think 30 years now in clinics, just with really crappier technology prior to the latest wave. But it's been used for phobias, for all sorts of cognitive behavioral issues, specifically for this superpower that you're mentioning. So you could create a desensitization gradual experience. And there's a couple softwares like that you could really, I think, like I have, desensitize yourself to that phobia, because I certainly have benefited.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Virtualeap, it's all good. Everything's based on scientific data and research. I think in your team you have actually one neuroscientist, and I even saw that you've got a chief memory officer. Maybe you can comment on that. I've never come across such a title.
It's a brand new title. We invented it.
What is this now?
I think it only makes sense in the context of a brain training company. But he's more like the chief product officer, but chief memory officer just sounds so cool. Nelson Dellis, he's a 4-time USA memory champion. He's the author of 2 memory technique books. He's right now messaging me from the top of Everest, funny enough, or maybe not the top of Everest, probably like somewhere on Everest, because he just started this week. And because he's a 5-time climber of mountains like this, Kilimanjaro, all this. So he's a crazy superhero that we have on board. He's on the Netflix documentary called Memory Games, if anyone wants to see him on some shows. So, but most importantly, he's actually consulted for companies like Lumosity and Peak, that are the smartphone-based brain training companies, for about a decade on product development and all sorts of stuff. So he's an integral part of our team.
That's awesome. Pretty cool. And so what kind of research have you been, like, I guess, leveraging so far, and how does it work? I know you do a lot of reading. You've got a team as well.
Yeah.
You've got partners? Do you work with, I guess, health institutions? How does it work? How do you get your research data, and what kind of research have you been leveraging so far, and what would you like to see more, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big question, because when you talk about a company that's in deep tech and VR and it's driven by science and neuroscience research, it's such a long road. So initially, what we do is you want to start creating and building up your MVP, your proof of concepts, right? and ultimately you start to look at what other secondary research has been done, and you create a white paper. And that's what we did back in. We published it, not published, but released it in January 2020, an initial white paper that cites 76 peer-reviewed studies. It details the different games that we initially launched and what they're based on, and which types of neuropsychological assessment tools, like the MBAC task, which was created in 1958, and we're taking that and bringing it into a VR rendered environment. We took a game from the research of Dr. Babar Sahakian's team at the University of Cambridge. They created an episodic memory, a long-term memory type of game that was designed to increase neural activity in the region of the brain associated with schizophrenia. And if you play it regularly, the symptoms of schizophrenia were noticed to actually get less. We took one of that research, made that into a game. So a lot of it is about initial lowest hanging fruit, taking game mechanisms that are already well tested, well attuned, commonly used, standardized, taking those first. We have about 12 games as of right now in the library, and each one is designed as a closed loop game. So you basically level off at the level of your maximum difficulty, right? And if you're doing worse, you go lower level. It's basically all about like going to the gym and doing a machine workout. You use the weight level that you can, and that kind of shows you where you are, and you see if there's any changes over time. If you got COVID, do you notice that during that? Are you one of 3 people who are experiencing memory fog and cognitive impairment? You see that in your scores. It's that kind of tool. But the research has been very secondary up until now. As I mentioned, our first 2 clinical studies, they're both 2 years long. One's 18 months, actually, and one's 22 months. So about 2 years-ish. One is focused on type 2 diabetes and its relationship to cognitive decline. The other one is focused on Alzheimer's in general. There's other studies coming up, like the VA healthcare system. We're working with them in San Francisco. They want to do a study on traumatic brain injury causing addiction. Addiction is a high risk factor to cognitive decline. We're going to be working with pediatrics. We're going to be working with sports like Rutgers Football League. Each one of these studies will show more evidence directly of our tool. But initially, we have to just get it out there. Then we find the partners. We have about 14 or so US and European partners where we are looking to do this kind of research, who even in our prototype stage, when we take that game based on the research, the neuroscientist designed it, works with a game developer, creates a prototype. Then we work with those partners like the Pacific Brain Health Center in in California, and they also help us vet whether the game is working. They do tolerability tests. There's a whole process. We have so much documentation that gets into this process too. We have a GDD, or game development document, developed for each game, and it's a very long document telling you everything from the research to the testing, to the prototyping phase, to the tutorials that were built in, all this stuff, including maybe most importantly, we've created a game scoring system, proprietary algorithm that essentially gives you a weighted score per game, and then loops up into the category, and then gives you a universal EPI score that ultimately is the most important thing, ultimately that it has to be always objective and also built in such a way that whenever we add new games, it just jumps into the game scoring system and it doesn't have to be modified or anything. So a lot goes into it. We're hoping in the next year or so, we're going to see a lot of evidence on the one hand to show that we are the next gold standard of cognitive assessment, which means that we can correlate to all the standardized pen and paper and types of tests, but also show that we're even better, more effective, more objective, more comprehensive, because we are a digital format that is ecologically valid and multisensory. And then maybe in a few years, it seems pretty certain to me, but will be validated as a digital therapeutic, to be used to address attention deficit and cognitive decline in all sorts of ways, as a rehabilitation tool that's reimbursable by insurance companies and so on.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. And I think people need to probably realize, right? Maybe it's fair to say, I don't know, you're not sort of reinventing the wheel. You're actually enhancing existing, assessment provided by neuroscience, but you're enhancing that experience, and like you said, it's probably actually more accurate because, right, in terms of data point, you're not with a pencil and a paper here.
How can it not be? How can it not be, right? It's like an additional dimension has been added into the game, which means that your nonverbal circuitry is engaged in an experience, so there's less fatigue setting into the data and deteriorating the data because you're starting to, in a 40-minute pen and paper, how much engagement do you really have in an experience that is 2D versus an ecologically valid experience that's engaging your systems, not just your cognitive, but also your emotional systems and your experiential circuitry. All of them are engaged in one experience. And so, I think that's very intuitive to a lot of us, the psychosomatic relationship of the body and the mind, and that we need to be physically interacting, if at all possible, with an experience in order to be able to, one, absorb it that much better. But the data should also show that higher, superior quality. And in terms of the data itself, it's not just the engagement that makes the data better, but also the fact that all of these headsets, whether it's the Oculus Quest 2 by Facebook, or any of these more advanced headset like the HP Omniset is about to launch, I think, next week, which has pupil dilation tracking. It has facial gesture tracking. It has heart rate tracking. Maybe in the next year or so, they'll have skin conductivity. And it takes these biosensory integrated, inputs from the headset, and they use AI to actually calculate your cognitive load and perhaps your stress and all these things. You take all that data, but you also get this default data of all this gesticulation. I was about to dance there. Gesticulation data of your arms and your hands and your limbs. We know where you're standing or sitting. We know whether you hit the ball with your front hand, your backhand. We can compare the hand comparisons. All that data, that volumetric data, is being collected in these experiences on top of the gaming moments. You see? So it's just mind-bogglingly, like, it's an order of magnitude, if not two orders of magnitude, more data and more engagement, in general. So like you say, it's an enhancement all across the board. The only thing to say is there's going to be a limit when we hit that limit of how many games we can actually translate from the library of the past. And somewhat, we have to start creating new games inspired by neuropsychological principles. So we will have a point where it will move away from the, recycling and start being also careful and inventing with our partners, like the University of Cambridge, because that was a pretty recent study that we took one of the games and we put it into VR.
Yeah, so that. And so in terms of, I guess, your collaboration with different, I guess, healthcare partners in the future or even present, I mean, you've mentioned things are moving fast and we're seeing things like medical extended reality, which is pretty cool. So Virtualeap, you enable your users you empower them to have access to, I guess, the data, and it's sort of neuroscience, the direct data to neuroscience, and you can monitor, you can enhance your cognitive health. Do you plan in partnerships with healthcare to also prescribe, and how would that look like? Would it be some sort of lifestyle suggestions, and maybe also you can comment on placebo effect? I saw a couple of studies.
Yeah.
And maybe I want to also to challenge you a bit. And as a co-founder, as the CEO of your company, are you, I guess, a bit worried, or do you think about the potential conflict of interest when partnering with the likes of pharma industry or medical practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complicated question, though, because going backwards, the first priority is to show that our company isn't creating a solution that has any improvement or benefits. That's not the first rule. That's the longer term, probably 5 year or maybe 3 years if we're lucky. We can show evidence for what they call transferability. So if you play these games regularly, does it make you better at remembering your grocery list? The jury's out on that. It's not that it's not true. It's just it's a very big mission that many people in the neuroscience community are all after to prove what improves cognitive function through plasticity and all the things we know about that. But the first thing to do is to show that we're the most advanced, the new gold standard of cognitive assessment. And I think that's not controversial at all. So that's the first point. We are definitely going down the road, and I do think transferability does exist, but I think you have to pair our solution with something that contextualizes the experience you just had into your daily life activities. I think there's a bridge component that needs to be included before our experience in and of itself can improve things. I do think there's a lot of self-knowledge and edtech applications, or the therapeutic ones need to really be, it's such a complicated web, the human condition. With pharma companies, when you look at the U.S., you see a pandemic of other kinds, right? You see the opioid situation. You see a lot of doctors and medical communities, I guess, endorsing drugs to be, from the European point of view, I think, overprescribed. For example, I think the medical community in the U.S. knows this. They're trying to weave away from it. Italy Interactive in June last year had their game Endeavor RX declared the first video game to be as a prescribed treatment for pediatric ADHD. Children 8 to 12 years old can now be prescribed this game to try to help with their ADHD instead of giving them, God knows, Adderall, Ritalin, one of these drugs. I think if you take that aside and you say the U.S. that was a weird example. I think what's going to happen is, pharma companies do have these drugs, but when it comes to neuroscience related drugs, they're having a hard time getting them approved. So, for example, Alzheimer's drugs, there hasn't been an Alzheimer's drug designed to address Alzheimer's in a way that's not about placating or managing the symptoms. Like, we have drugs that can help manage the symptoms, but drugs that can actually improve the situation of Alzheimer's or maybe prevent it, there's no such thing yet. There's been failure after failure. There's been 99% failure rate in the last 15 years. Not a single drug has come out. It costs 5 times more than any other drug to go through clinical trials. It's about $5 billion for an average Alzheimer's drug, I believe, and like $1 billion for a cancer treatment, which is the second most expensive. So failure. Neuroscience is crazy. There's not really much you can do except managing the symptoms. So what we do see with pharma companies is actually that they look at companies like us as the next gold standard of cognitive assessment to serve as a companion diagnostic that can help their drugs get into the market faster. And I think when it comes to Alzheimer's and how scary Alzheimer's is, or any of these cognitive illnesses, I think we need to work with the pharma companies in some kind of synergy where technologies like ours can pair with their drugs when it comes to these very scary diseases. When it comes to ADHD and attention deficit and memory fog, I think we would do well to minimize the amount of drugs we use and try to see what kind of lifestyle factors. Our tool might be able to give early warning to people when their cognitive situation declines, and they don't only go to a specialist when it goes too far down. They could get earlier warning way earlier, and therefore look at their diet, look at their social situations, look at their environmental factors, and try to see what they can do in their lifestyle to avoid that situation from getting worse if possible. Because I think a lot of the issues right now with people taking pharma drugs for cognitive issues is because they didn't know something was happening. It was subjective, and it became really bad because they just did not know. They were not informed. And I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see technologies like ours all about making us empowered patients,
Yeah, no, it's great thoughts, Amir. I agree with you. And there's something quite profound, actually, about just using VR to detect early onset of these diseases like Alzheimer's or schizophrenia. And I think we should mention, I guess, the playfulness of it, of the games. And I think that it's a positive, because usually if you tell a patient or users, right, oh, you have to do this exercise, or you have to engage with XYZ that way to improve, But with Virtualeap or with VR, you play, and so time flies, you don't feel it. You're actually looking forward for your next exercise the next day. It's really great to use that playfulness, which is in all humans, I think.
It really pisses me off, by the way. It's like, for example, it's the Peter Pan syndrome, It's like, for example, my last article for VentureBeat was about how, surprisingly to many, VR is being really, really adopted well by the senior living community, by older adults. They're like, well, no, my grandpa won't play this VR stuff. He can barely, he hates even using phones. Well, phones are way more alien technology. This is not a native user interface. When you create a VR rendered experience, we have a person who's always involved in the very beginning called an accessibility design expert. And they have to make it based on the idea that if someone's colorblind or someone's restricted to a wheelchair, mobility restriction, our games can adapt to those, that we have the accessibility settings to be able to adapt to that. But in general, VR is an imitation of the real world, and it follows the same instinctive interface that any human understands how to navigate. And it's all about creating, augmented ways of that user interface to make it even easier or more pleasant than even the real world. So when we've seen the elderly or old adults, I'm not sure which one's the PC term anymore to refer to the older population, but we have this association as the younger generations that we're like, we want to pigeonhole them and say what they can or can't do. When you put anyone at any age in a VR experience, there's a pleasant, refreshing experience because it is the real world in virtual reality. So, I totally agree with you. The second thing I want to mention is there's an aspect to that, which is the older you get, the less fun you want to have. Like, what the hell? Like, who said that? Like, who are these boring people who have these boring ideas of how we should just age and become boring individuals? Play is what we're wired for. We've always been wired for it, and we're always going to be. And the more we embrace that play into our entire lifespan, I think that will be revealed as a very important factor in aging well.
Yes, actually, yeah. Even the science proved that you can trick your brain and mind. It's a sort of anti-aging remedy of some sort to have this childlike inner spirit and just having this playfulness that can be enhanced by VR. And I remember I've read, you probably know him, of course, Jaron Lanier. I remember I've read this book on the dawn of everything on VR, and he said, like VR will always remain virtual, yes, but it amplifies real reality, right? Definitely, it's an immersive experience.
Right.
Yeah.
But the only thing I want to say about that is that people need to really see VR as part of a spectrum, and that spectrum is typically called. I think the best one is spatial computing. And on one end, you have virtual reality. On the other end of spatial computing, you have augmented reality. And augmented reality is when we have, the Apple, glasses come out, hopefully in the next couple of years, where you have these, nice lenses that you just put on in your real world. And you might be on your bicycle and it shows you in Google Maps where to navigate, or it might translate in real time another language for you, or it might put digital sprites of let's say you're in Disneyland and Mickey Mouse comes before your eyes and starts navigating you and showing you how to use the park and navigate stuff. That's augmented reality. It's designed for pervasive in-life activities where it can come into the real world. Virtual reality is just same spectrum, but on the opposite side where it's surgical and about meditative focused experiences where you shut out the real world, and people love to compare them like they're against each other. They're just the same damn spectrum. In fact, we create everything as VR creators, you create either in two different game engines, either Unity 3D or Unreal Engine. And these, game engines, whatever we have in VR right now, they can be turned into AR experiences, and we're already prototyping stuff like that. It's just very early days for the AR world. But virtual reality has to be taken into context for what it is and what it's best for. A lot of companies and a lot of journalists, they try to hype it up constantly, and that confuses the consumer population. They think that it's only a gaming platform. It is not. Gaming is the least important thing it is for. Maybe it makes a lot of money on the gaming side, but where it helps humanity is in the corporate environment of training people on factory floors on something, or empathy teaching, training, healthcare applications, phobia treatments. This is the kick-ass features that it's designed for, but it needs to be seen in context.
Absolutely, and I think I think it has great potential to, I guess, complement existing healthy lifestyles, like you've mentioned. So cognition is everything. Like these days, like we see PT, HIIT trainings, physical activity is super trendy, which is good. I'm into athletics actually, and I love it. But that ultimately has positive impact, I think, on your cognition. Yes, but what about taking proactive steps to enhance one's cognitive health system? And I think so. I'm definitely an advocate, and I think it's important to take proactive steps, whether you healthy or not. I think it's important to take care of your cognition. Your brain is everything, right? And
right. And to take into account any ways of being able to track it, to pay attention to what's happening, even if it's not about, like my point of view as a CEO of a company like this. If you compare it to companies like Lumosity, and they were fined like I think it was initially a big amount, but then they reduced it to 2 million. FTC, and they basically paid a fine because their marketing outstripped the actual science. They were claiming things about it doing things just to get more money or whatever. There was a disconnect between their marketing team and their science team. Something weird happened, and I never want to sell my soul for anything. I just want to sleep well at night in general. I know I can be a salesy person, but that's my role in the company. I have to be. I'm the only non-technical member of the team. But one thing I will not do is let the cart go in front of the horse. The science has to always be the priority. We're not saying you can improve anything. Just tracking things is so important, though. And I think when you track it, you also get a lot of self-knowledge as part of that. You learn, for example, every time you log into our app, you self-report the number of hours you slept and your mood from a 5-point scale. And it's not the best thing to do. I mean, obviously we want Fitbit data and raw stuff, but still, when you have self-reported data like that, you get to contextualize it. When I sleep too much or I sleep too little, does it affect any of my cognitive faculties? If so, which ones? It's not just, does it affect my memory? Our games actually show whether it gives you data on the breakdown of what memory is. Does it affect my short-term memory, my working memory, my long-term memory, for spatial orientation, for accuracy, for problem solving? They all break down into like little different child categories, and you get all this self-knowledge, and you can know based on your lifestyle. If I got wasted on the weekend because it was my friend's birthday and I was really drunk and I got a horrible hangover, how does that affect my performance when I'm eating certain things? Maybe I'm a person who avoids gluten. I don't know. Anything in your lifestyle, you should be also tracking how your cognitive health is being affected. And this kind of tool gives you that data to be able to respond in terms of your lifestyle as well. Now, as the CEO of a brain training company, I definitely look towards the therapeutic applications. But that's a second dimension. The first dimension that's so important is just having a relationship with that type of empirical data that tells you about your mental fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so we're both based in Europe, right? You're in Portugal, I'm in the UK. I traveled quite a bit, and it's interesting to see that not all nations, I guess, have the same maturity stage in regards to neuroscience or using VR to monitor cognition. So, for instance, I lived in China. Back then, we didn't have any cognitive assessment, but we had definitely some physical healthcare check, some serious ones. But the neighbors, Japan, I know I have friends living there. I know that every year they have to go through, I think, a cognitive assessment. So it's interesting to see across different nations, taking different steps, and maybe Europe and Western societies will kind of look at Japan and I guess have these cognitive assessments available to all its citizens.
Yeah, Japan is really proactive when it comes to cognitive assessment. But again, they're also, I think, one of the key pioneers in brain training and neuropsychological assessment tools and technologies like fMRI machines. Companies like Ricoh out there create these amazing brain imaging and neural imaging technologies. I think their society is very also stressed out. We always hear about Japan and South Korea on the top list of self-harm, stats and so on, which is a different issue. But that means they're probably on the opposite side, very, very sensitive to being as proactive as possible with these kinds of risk factors in that their culture might be a little bit more predisposed to because of their society and how everything operates. I don't know why they're so advanced when it comes to this, but we definitely see with a lot of technologies that Japan and South Korea are my points of interest, because I see a lot happening there. China, I don't know what the hell's happening. It's like a entire universe of different things. But Japan, I can go here. That's what's happening. And what we do notice is the Western world is often catching up to whatever trend is really like, the mobile games that are so popular right now. I can tell you, I was a games publisher. They were first popular in Japan. It took like at least a few years before the Western appetite got into those types of games. We see certain habits form there first. And I think if we look at Japan from the point of view of their proactiveness with cognitive assessment, I think in about 5 to 10 years, we will have a society, hopefully, that looks at our mental health in the same way they do, and that we're ultimately at the very least, doing annual checkups of our cognitive health, not just our physical health.
Yeah, have a more holistic approach to health. And so I had a quick browse of your website, and very interesting use cases, I guess. And I would like us to quickly cover, I guess, we've talked about education and healthcare. I'm deeply curious about the use cases for companies, sorry, using it as part of their performance programs and athletics, because I'm into sports. Aren't you a bit worried I guess because some companies could use these tools to, I guess, eliminate people that don't fall under the right categories, so to speak. And we're seeing that somehow with, algorithms and maybe
Shit.
you haven't.
Yeah, you had to go there.
I had to go there.
Well, I mean, listen, if VR can heal you, then it can harm you. Right? What was it? Was it a Black Mirror episode? No, there was a Black Mirror episode on something like that, but it was
I think it was Black Mirror.
But I think I know what you're talking about, but the one I'm thinking about is Carbon Footprint, Carbon something. It's a sci-fi thing where the person's mind can be moved to another body. There's a disc, Carbon something, Altered Carbon. It's called. And it was shown in a couple episodes at least. VR torture techniques. They would put them in a VR situation and they could torture them and kill them repeatedly over and over again. It was a little more hardcore than what virtual reality offers today. But the idea is that if I can desensitize you from a phobia, then I should be equally able to create a phobia in you as well, right? So trauma can be created in VR because it is an imitation of the real world. Ethical standards are unheard of, really, in terms of what policies are being used right now. If a person's creating a VR experience, it should go under an ethical standard review from the point of view of a psychological council of neuroscientists and go whether this thing could cause trauma. If you put someone in a VR horror movie, will that person die of a heart attack if they have a high blood pressure? And we can detect those things with some of these headsets. So maybe it goes, your heart rate and your pulse and your physiological health shows that you should not be on this VR roller coaster. You know what I mean? We don't have that aspect. And so moving that over to your question about, human performance programs, and it makes me think of the movie Gattaca, where they use blood.
I love this movie. Yeah,
I've watched Gattaca way more than you. That's for sure. I'm so addicted to that movie. It's so amazing. Maybe you have watched it more than me, but I'll be hurt if anyone's seen that movie more obsessively than I have. But it's a very true point you're making. There was one big corporation that just contacted us a few months ago, and they have a human performance program. They're buying hundreds of headsets for sales training, and they want to actually map the psychographic landscape of an individual who's their best salesman and try to see what the ones that are not doing as good in performance, what are they lacking, and can they use our tools like ours to be able to help them perform better in those ways, or even weed them out and just look for people with those psychological qualities and then only hire them. I think you're totally right. I think emerging technologies are full of dangers, and we're going to experience all of them wave by wave. But humanity has never been a pleasant ride, just in and of itself. 2021, I've never seen the world in worse shape in some ways. A lot of things are great. We got better toilets. In Japan, you got laser targeted toilets. Amazing stuff there. But in terms of morality and human situation and the human drama, mental health, oh my God, I don't have any evidence of that. So I think these technologies will have plenty of negative use cases. Hopefully, a lot of these companies have good people navigating those technologies, because technology it's a double-edged sword, right? And it's only as safe or good or dangerous as the person who's wielding that sword.
Absolutely. And here I'm just, playing devil's advocate, but totally.
Oh, it's really good. I'm so glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Making me sweat.
Yeah, Gattaca. I love this movie, but hey. But yeah, like you said, it's a yin and yang thing, right? Like everything in life. Something good brings something bad, and well, we shall see. And
our parents are traumatizing us and giving us good qualities, both in the same time. Some more than others on the negative side, right? That's all about Freudian and Jungian psychology. Like, there's nothing in our life that doesn't have that double-edged sword quality. But I think what you're pointing to, it should really be a topic of interest right now. It's just, I don't think it's being given that interest right now because it's cowboy country days. where it's just like gold rush. We're not thinking about the detrimental sides and the negative sides and policing those. Sorry to cut you off, but it's a very exciting topic.
No, I love it. Please go ahead if you have any other comments. But I agree, it's just interesting to see. I mean, me, I'm pro tech, Well, I'm very optimistic about the future, but I'm not naive. I like to also explore the dark side, the yin and yang of
you
things.
also like you have a certain. Let me just make an assumption about you. I would say that you probably also have a little bit of an anarchistic side that keeps yourself always going, where can the negative side of technology take away from our humanness as well? Like, I think the best people who use technology in the right ways, they have a deep, not spiritual, but sacredness to the human experience. And we want technology to enhance our capacity to engage with real life even more, not, replace it, So that's my assumption about you so far. I think it's the same as myself.
Yeah, probably, definitely. Take the best of, this world, but also trying to be aware, of how these things impact you as a human, just to be a better technologist at the end, right? And not being a slave to the machines and everything around it. But yeah, I think, exciting times, I guess, for and it's just, I think, interesting to see. It's like this big wave coming to us, whether it's the rise of ER, and then in parallel you have more powerful infrastructure, whether it's 5G, and then the rise of gene editing tools as well. So it's just all coming together, and
you got it. You know it. All that's in your head, so you get it. 5G is going to be I mean, there's always fears about that stuff, but 5G is inevitable, and 5G is indispensable to the rise of AR. Because also even with VR, 5G means that we can move a lot of processing that usually happens locally to the device, and we can move that to edge computing, so servers that are actually processing it for you, doing the graphics processing, and that means the devices get lighter and lighter too, which makes it more accessible, makes it cheaper, all that stuff. So 5G is going to, it's just hard to say when 5G is going to be pervasive, but it is indispensable to the rise of augmented reality and making, I think in like 30 years, 40 years, you might be walking around in a pretty boring world in terms of decoration, because you got the augmented reality creating white walls into anything you got. A lot of places might just actually be very augmented oriented, because 5G is so pervasive that it almost is like you're living in a magical time, like 1,000 years ago, where there's digital sprites floating around you. Your friends are popping up as holograms, communicating to you, walking with you. Very ghostly experience, because it's all developed and made possible because of 5G and whatever comes after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for Virtualeap, obviously, we are not static. The world is not static, and things are moving fast. And I don't know, but in a couple of years, who knows? Do you think that your company will, I guess, naturally expand from VR to just be a sort of data company, and you could work, I don't know, with companies that do like brain computer interfaces, I don't know, or sort of like biotech companies. So you could just be like a sort of not just data provider, but a data company doing VR and maybe more like BCI and neuroscience as a service. Who knows?
Sounds like, I don't know. I feel like you have access to our data folders or something. But that's exactly correct. I think ultimately we're creating a lot of. We talk about early detection of cognitive illnesses, right? But how would you do that? You have these volumetric data sets. What we've actually done is we're collaborating with a couple of entities right now and working on research protocols where we would create AI learning tools that would ultimately digest the data in such a way in order to be able to detect the subtle changes that would be impossible without AI learning tools, without machine learning. And so from that point of view, we're becoming more and more about more like API, that other types of technologies, other types of data providers, content providers would be able to link up with and work with. And in fact, we would probably not create games ourselves, but actually let third parties create games that our API connects to bring intelligence out of the data itself. So I totally agree. In 10 years, we could be a data company just as much, if not more so, than a VR company, for example, or a healthcare or educational company.
Yeah, that would make sense. But that would be, I guess, yeah, natural evolution. And anyway, I wish you all the best on that. If you're going, in that direction, I think that would be awesome.
And
So,
used in the worst way too, huh? If we're a data company doing that kind of stuff, what can we be doing in facilitating really evil use of data, right? So, what was it? One of the Batman movies is like you see yourself a hero until you live long enough, and then you become the villain. Is that something like that? So, we might in 10 years, I might have like really shady looking mustache and quite evil. So who
yeah,
knows?
you will just go back to your favorite movie, Amir. That would be awesome. I got
Yeah, I'll be. You can inadvertently be instrumental in creating the future of Gattaca, rather than avoiding it. That's the funny twists and paradoxes of life.
Who knows? Who knows? So I just want to pick up on something that's actually quite refreshing to hear. You said earlier, hey, I don't believe in VR experiences like said whatever, I think half an hour or 20 minutes, and
Mm.
finally someone speaking common sense.
I'm not popular though, just so you know. You might have invited me on your podcast, and some people do, but I'm not popular in the VR community for saying that. Most people in VR are all about games and AAA kill zombies and going into immersive reality for hours and trying to maximize session lengths, right? Making things more addictive. Our games are all about making them not addictive, because the more addictive you find the games, the more you play them, you habituate. The data can actually be damaged, not damaged, but deteriorated because of that. So we're the opposite. But I think anything longer than 15 minutes to me is not well suited for VR. I think that's when augmented reality comes in, mixed reality comes in.
Yeah, but I agree with you. But I guess, well, I played, I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to games. Like sometimes I like to go to arcade games. Again,
I can tell, by the way, right away. But anyways,
the playfulness of it, and I played Mario Kart in VR. So
ooh,
little I had a Nintendo 64, so that
I'm
was like,
huge. I would
that's
play with.
huge.
Let's play. Okay, that's an exception. Mario Kart. I'll play with you for hours.
Yes, my friend, but on VR, good luck managing the
Really?
cybersickness.
Oh
I
yeah.
was crazy, and I had a flying car. I like to,
Did you have a customized cart that you were in, or were
yeah,
you just playing it? Yeah.
yeah. So my favorite character is Yoshi, obviously, like Yoshi, right?
Chosen well.
Yeah,
Good choice.
but yeah, very good choice. And well, I love Mario Kart so much. Lisa, again, I had a Nintendo 64, and when I
You
saw
have
that,
no idea who you're talking to. I am the biggest Mario Kart fanatic ever. I hail you. Keep going. Sorry, I have interrupted you 100,000 times.
yeah, I make sure I'll let you know, if we've got another VR session in London with Mario Kart. But that was absolutely fantastic. I felt like, okay, I'm the happiest human alive here playing Mario Kart in VR. Here you go. But I'm with you when you said that I don't believe in VR experiences that exceed 20 minutes, because I don't know about you, but me, biologically, I'm still human. Hello, and
Yeah,
the cyber sickness is real.
it's
Whoa,
real.
yeah, it's
That's why
real.
accessibility design is so important. When someone's creating a VR experience, they used to 3 years ago only, this was the most popular headset. It was the Oculus Go. It was a 3 degree of freedom headset. It means 3 degrees means it has no body tracking. It means it's a glorified 360 viewer. So they were doing roller coaster experiences where your body, it wasn't connected, and so nausea was all over the place because people were creating these wild movement games that your body is having a problem with because it's not registering any movement physically, and so it creates nausea because there's some kind of disconnect between what your body should be experiencing first and foremost. It's a very common thing back then, and less so with the 6DoF headsets that do have external body trackers and so on. But that's so true. And I think when people create that experience for you, for example, it can really put you off VR because that creator kind of didn't care about those types of factors.
Yeah, and I think hence why I personally think that your company is and will continue to be successful, because you take that into account. You understand the power of VR, but also, I guess, the downsides related to cyber sickness. But hey, that's not an issue because you can still accomplish whatever you plan to do, and you don't need to play more than 20 minutes, and you can
True.
take breaks. And
But our games are actually also in place games. So you never walk around in a physical location, or the experience doesn't move you in the opposite side into other areas. It's always, I'm standing in this fixed position and the game is playing in front of me, and I have full 360 use of it. I have interactivity with the objects in the rendered environment, and it moves and changes as I move and sway my body. But we don't have, when you bring in movement, either movement of yourself, which is actually good. If you have like a location-based entertainment VR place that you can actually move from wall to wall and it actually has a VR experience, that's great. That's a good one. But when you don't have movement in your physical body and the content is moving, that's the trick. And that's what I think creators have to avoid in most cases. It's like, our circuitry takes thousands of years to adapt to new things. I don't think it's going to be adapting to that cybersickness anytime soon. So for any creators out there, do not create environments that move without, there are some that could work, but like in general, it's a very dangerous territory when you create that disconnect between movement and visceral reception or recognition of movement, Like my body has to know I'm moving, and if I'm moving a car, then it needs to know that the feeling of the car screeching and moving with gravity. It's designed to feel gravity in those situations. And so if you're steering a car on the edge of the turn and there's no physical movement of the torque or all that stuff, then you're causing a disconnect. I forget the term. It's like it's a cognitive dissonance of some sort, right? Between physical, integral, visceral reality and external visual reality. You have to connect the two. You have to bridge them in some way. And so some of the creators out there do have haptic oriented like car devices, and when you're driving it shows it, and the wind is actually blowing in your face. I mean, they're out there. They're just kind of inaccessible for you to bring into your home. They're usually only available, because they're expensive too, at these arcades or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, quick question, Amir, I guess on the end user. So I'll just give you a quick anecdote of me playing Mario Kart, all good fun. But so do you think, I didn't really gather some data on that, but are you some sort of like disappointed of like the slow takeoff of VR from a consumer perspective? And do you think that would improve down the line with, better access to handsets at, more with better cost of, options? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Facebook is heavily subsidizing the cost of these headsets. They should, their latest the Quest was $400 last year. Now the Quest 2 is $300. Your smartphones are 3 times that price sometimes, if not twice. The chip maker that's in the Quest 2 is from Qualcomm, and they're subsidizing the price of that chip that's designed for VR experiences too. So the cost isn't really the issue. I think the form factor, the weight of it, the lack of society feeling it's kind of awkward to see someone in the public wearing a VR headset. I don't think VR should be in public, to be honest, from my point of view. So I'm against that to begin with. VR is not to be adopted in the ways that the journalists and the big companies with vested interests in creating a market, they have hyped it up so much and said really outlandish figures for themselves. And I think you have to let a technology like this grow gradually, and particularly from the more serious use cases like what we're doing in clinical settings and hospital settings and self-help kind of environments. So, I'm not disappointed at VR's adoption. I'm wary and weary of the journalists and people who want to set the false expectations. Because if we don't have false expectations, we're not disappointed. It's always the disconnect between expectations and hype. So if anything, in the last year and a half of this pandemic, we've seen an acceleration of demand and interest in VR. So the only good thing about this biblical plague has been a catalyst for emerging technologies to be used to help us in these really strange and challenging times. So aside from my comments about VR's adoption in general, this is also a time where I think VR is helping us in lots of ways for remote collaboration, remote training, remote health, all these kind of things.
It's true. And I'm just thinking, when talking about adoption, maybe, hey, who knows, down the line, things like gyms will actually have VR headsets in which you could train your.
Absolutely.
Imagine, that would be cool. It's not just, you could train physically, but then,
Or
hey, learn
AR.
brain time.
Or augmented reality headsets instead, right? Because then you don't have to feel, I mean, maybe you go into a box and you put on the VR headset, but it gets sweaty pretty soon. How are you taking care of the sweat that's starting to pour? My wife uses it for this boxing game, so she loves, but then after like 15 minutes of her playing it, I don't want to put that headset on after her, or, it's disgusting. How are you making it hygiene? It's a lot of questions about it being used in gyms, but that said, VR fitness experiences are probably the most popular ones right now. So if you look at some of the experiences out there, they're really popular. People are losing a lot of weight who would otherwise never gone to the gym. It's huge for that. I just think the ultimate manifestation of that will be when it moves over to augmented reality. And also with 5G, making those devices smaller and smaller.
Yep. So Amir, you are, I presume you're a successful entrepreneur, right? You've got a great company. Do you have any advice? And I think you like psychology as well, right? And like sometimes you see some entrepreneurs or I guess business leaders, they have practiced what we call, or what social psychiatrists call impression management, like fake it till you make it. And we see, I guess, being an entrepreneur is hard. I have many close friends, and it takes a lot, from your mind, body, and soul. Do you have any advices for entrepreneurs that want to, I guess, increase the chance of success?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the kind of person who has I think, a traditional look on entrepreneurship. I don't think I would have ever chosen for myself to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes you just get obsessed with something, and it's kind of like the old saying of a muse, whispering in your ear, and you being possessed by some kind of benevolent demon or angel or something, and that's forcing you to do the momentum of something. Because where is that energy coming from? Where is that motivation coming from? Being an entrepreneur in general is a very tough thing, but being one in the healthcare sector or education sector is very brutal as well. I think mental health amongst us can be really, really horrible. I think those things never get to be shared on these kind of podcasts and stuff. I think when we look at a lot of entrepreneurs who got successful, we look at them like it was their doing. And I want to say something controversial, which is I think that's bullshit. I think you get into a venture and it has a fate, a destiny, and it might be successful in day one because of something that's completely just the right timing, with the right people, with the right thing. If you're doing a project and it's not the right time, it might just be one of the 90% who fail, right? And those that comes with shame and embarrassment and all these things. And constantly when you're an entrepreneur, you're always psychologically have these tribal circuitries alive in you going, what if I fail? What does that say about me? Why they got successful? Why can't I get successful? Am I a loser? They're a winner. Am I a winner? Are they a loser? That when someone gets successful as an entrepreneur, they might forget how much luck was involved in them being able to be successful, and they actually start seeing themselves as a guru, and then talking on podcasts like this about this and that, and giving you ingredient books and rules to follow and all these things. But just like every cognitive profile when you play our games shows a different kind of fingerprint of what you're good at and what you're bad at, everyone has their own direction to go and their own particular way of being successful or not successful. So that's one point. I think there's not one rule for success whatsoever. You're either compelled to do it or you're not. I think more important to that is this, though. I believe strongly in the hero's journey, psychologically. I believe these experiences are going into a Herculean series of tasks that you're slaying dragons that externally are a representation of your own internal struggle of managing your stress levels, managing yourself in these experiences, creating psychological sophistication, doing alchemy inside where no one can see it, being more and more resilient. This is the real goal of what you do in entrepreneurship or any type of adventure. It's an adventure where you have to set out first and foremost that it's a development of yourself internally. And I think as long as that's where your focus is as well, I think regardless of success or failure, you may become a better you as part of the experience.
Thank you, Amir. Great words in thinking. I have one last question that I always ask my guest. What are the skills and or character traits that helped you so far in your life? And that's my last question for you.
And again, I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung and subconscious forces and personality types, and you know, um, someone's very mercurial and very, like, I talk really fast. I'm like a Chihuahua sometimes, right? That's a very different type than someone who's more like a Rottweiler, or someone who's like a Labrador, or someone, I'm trying to say that humans have certain integrated, wired in characteristics that are like just core to their being. And my type, values certain things because it's just the types of things that that type values. So sense of humor, um, you know, uh, emotional connection, these types of things. I think everyone has them, but I cannot live in a boring world without play. I have to see things always in a hopefully in a way that I can see a bigger picture than just what's being done. I think me looking for meaning constantly, bigger than the actual experience, looking for meaning on meeting people and all these kind of things that creates more than just the more meaning than just the sum of the parts. I think always yearning for a purpose and an aim and having a direction that's higher than yourself. I think, we can call it, back in the old days, religious or spiritual or whatever, but I think it's just something that's just so integral into the human spirit that we have to be, we have to mean for something. And I think that's the most important thing in my life.
Amir, it's been a great pleasure talking to you today.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great way to start the day.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Mind Narrative podcast. If you enjoy the content, we welcome your support by contributing on Patreon. Find out more at mindnarrative.co.uk. Bye.